Good evening and welcome to the 2022 Democratic gubernatorial primary debate live from Columbia. I'm Gavin Jackson. With Election Day just days away, we are joined in the studio with three candidates running to represent the Democratic Party in the governor's race. And they are State Senator Mia McLeod of Richland County, former 1st District Congressman Joe Cunningham, and Carlton Boyd, a healthcare advocate from Columbia. Joining me tonight to question the candidates is Nick Reynolds of the Post and Courier and South Carolina Public Radio's Alicia Eady. And just a note, William Williams and Calvin McMillan were both invited but did not confirm their invites. Before we begin, some ground rules. Each candidate will have the opportunity to make a 1-minute opening statement. And from there, they will have a 1 minute to answer our questions, if necessary. And if necessary, I will allow a 30-second rebuttal. Now, when candidates arrive, they drew numbers for questioning order. And with that, we start with Senator McLeod with your opening statement.
Thank you, Nick. I'm Senator Mia McLeod, a 7th-generation South Carolinian born and raised in the PD. I'm the only qualified candidate in this primary who has state government experience in the executive and legislative branches on both sides of the aisle. I'm no stranger to a fight, and I don't back down. I fought for this debate because the people of South Carolina deserve to see, hear, and understand the differences between us. As governor, I will continue to fight for a minimum wage of at least $15 an hour, to expand Medicaid, to fully and equitably fund public education, to legalize and decriminalize marijuana, to pass common sense gun reforms, and protect women's rights and reproductive freedoms. After 2 decades, we know what a losing strategy looks like. I hope that we'll elect a different candidate this year. I'm the only candidate. Thank you.
Congressman Cunningham.
Good evening. I'm Joe Cunningham, and I'm running for governor to bring our state out of the past and into the future. I'm a father, a 4-year-old son named Boone. I'm an attorney. I'm a former ocean engineer. For the last couple of years, I had the honor of representing the 1st Congressional District in Congress. And I got there by flipping a seat that no Democrat had flipped in my lifetime in the last 40 years. It's a district that President Trump had carried by 13 points just 2 years before. And when I got there, I was able to work with a divided Congress to get 2 of my bills signed into law by President Trump. And that's what we need here in South Carolina. Somebody can get things done. And there may not be a lot of issues up here tonight that we disagree on, but the key difference is that I'm the only candidate who can win in November and get things done. I look forward over the next hour, a discussion on the issues about a pathway to victory and how to win November and actually get results for the people of South Carolina.
Thank you, Congressman. Mr. Boyd.
Good evening. My name is Carlton Boyd. I'm a native of Darlington, South Carolina. South Carolinian, born and raised, and I'm ready to serve you as your governor. Let's just be honest. I am the only candidate that's here tonight that has had limited press coverage. But I will thank SCE-TV for this opportunity. Again, I will tell you, my name is Carlton Boyd, and I am up for the challenge. I am the guy who will challenge the challenge. And with that limited press coverage, tonight, I hope I will serve you and prove you well, and you will see why I will serve you well as your governor of South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Boyd. Congressman Cunningham, first question to you. Our state's roads and bridges have been underfunded for decades, but on July 1st, the 12-cent per gallon gas tax increase passed in 2017 will be fully phased in, providing the state with hundreds of millions of dollars for annual improvements. Right now, gas in the state is averaging $4.60 a gallon. That's a new record. Should the state suspend the soon-to-be 28-cent per gallon gas tax, despite SCDOT Secretary Christy Hall saying that it would derail such improvements?
Yes, absolutely. We should temporarily suspend the gas tax. We've been calling on the governor to do that. You know, our roads are in poor condition here in South Carolina. I mean, you don't need the signs to welcome you into South Carolina. When you drive in, you can actually just feel it. But the truth is, none of those construction projects will be held back or delayed because South Carolina has so much money coming in through the bipartisan infrastructure bill and the American Rescue Plan. But listen, folks, I mean, people are hurting, and the rising price of gas is crushing people at the pumps. And they need some form of relief. And We proposed this idea late last year, and it would save folks on average $5 a tank or more. And if there's something we can do to provide relief to South Carolinians, even short-term relief, we should do that. And I don't care if it's a Democratic or Republican idea, because it's being done in states across the country. So yes, we should temporarily suspend the gas tax, because that money will be replenished.
Mr. Boyd, that goes to you.
I'm in favor of suspending the gas tax, but I will tell you this. We have to be careful about how long we suspend it. For far too long, we've always gone over roads in which there have been limited improvements. What this does for a family is puts wear and tear on a car, no question about it. But with that wear and tear comes repairs, more tires, more alignments. Think about it. It could even save lives. So I do understand the need to suspend it, and I would suspend it, but I would limit the amount of time that it would be suspended.
And Senator McLeod.
Research shows that suspending the gas tax would have very little impact on the lives of everyday South Carolinians who are struggling to pay for gas. Just the other day, I went to put gas in my car, and it was over $5 a gallon, and I was shocked. But I introduced legislation earlier this year when gas prices started to rise that would have a more meaningful and more significant impact for South Carolinians. It's a gas rebate, and it would allow South Carolinians to get much more money back as opposed to a gas tax suspension. And I just think that is the way to go. When gas rises above $4 an hour, the gas rebate would kick in for families who need it most.
The next question is from Nick Reynolds to Mr. Carlton Boyd.
Mr. Boyd, South Carolina is one of the fastest growing states in the country. But with that change, shortages of affordable housing and gentrification in South Carolina's population centers has become a problem, as longtime residents are increasingly unable to afford their homes or pay for rent. As governor, what policies would you push to help solve this problem?
Well, this is a crisis in which has been going on for far too long now. Fortunately, with the new housing secretary, we do have funds that can come into South Carolina, and I would definitely tap into those funds. Honestly, I wish they were here sooner, but we're fortunate for what is available. You have families who are staying with other families. Do you know what that means? That constitutes the definition, the federal definition of homelessness, which means that even if someone is housed, they're still homeless. So yes, I make no secrets about it, and I am very confident that we can get South Carolina back to where it needs to be. And with these funds, I'm not opposed to looking into unconventional methods of housing, such as tiny homes, tiny villages. We have to get the work done. Yes, sir.
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. South Carolina is one of the fastest growing states in the country, but along with that change, we've seen issues with affordable housing shortages and gentrification in some of our major population centers. As governor, what policies would you support to help solve that problem?
Affordable housing has always been a problem. Initially, I got this question quite a bit from our young people who are leaving our state in droves because they aren't able to earn wages that will allow them to afford housing. And so I will prioritize working people across South Carolina. That is a big priority for me as governor. I want working people to be able to earn wages they can live on so that they can afford housing. I want our seniors to be well equipped to take care of themselves into their older years. And as governor, those needs have to be prioritized. The working people of South Carolina are working right now for $7.25 an hour. And I heard from young women who work in the tourism industry, in the service industry, and they were making $7 and $8 an hour and had roommates and still couldn't keep a roof over their heads. So as governor, I will prioritize the needs of working people and make sure that no one is homeless or not able to afford housing.
Great. And the next question is from Felicia Edie for Senator McLeod, sorry.
Senator, Inflation is at 8.6%.
Oh, sorry, I missed you, Joe Cunningham. So go ahead.
I was wondering about
We have the
that.
numbers mixed up here. Sorry, sir. Go ahead.
Did I answer and just forgot about it, or what?
Not a pass.
Okay. Well, I mean, look, this is stories you hear all across the state. And during our 46 county tour, where we're going to every single corner of the state, we're hearing these stories. Rent is rising, and wages aren't keeping up, and folks need relief. We've been holding roundtable discussions with teachers all across the state, and one teacher told me that she's leaving the profession because they raised the rent on her. And that has two parts. There's one issue with the teaching profession, but there's also an issue with inflation and rent, and we'll focus on the latter for now. When I look at affordable housing, I look at people facing rising costs. I look at what the wages, the money that's coming in, and the money that's going out. So we need better jobs in South Carolina, increased wages. We need to increase the minimum wage. And we also need to decrease the cost for South Carolinians. And we can do that, for instance, by expanding Medicaid. That will provide health care to hundreds of thousands of South Carolinians and decrease the cost of anyone who's on private insurance.
All right, now, Felicia, we have a question for Senator McLeod.
Now, Senator, inflation is at 8.6%, and employers are having a difficult time finding and keeping employees. These are two of the biggest problems facing our economy. And this is even as wages continue to go up. Our state's economy is strong with a 3.3% unemployment rate, but economic headwinds are still blowing. What would you do as governor to ensure that our state remains competitive?
Once again, I think we have to go back to the needs of working people. We have a new class in South Carolina called the working poor. These are people who are working for minimum wages and not able to buy food and gas and keep a roof over their heads. So we know that with the rising cost of inflation, we have to raise wages in this state. Our minimum wage has not been raised since 2009, but employers have gotten incentives and tax cuts every year. We have to prioritize the needs of working people and put them at the top of the list so that they can afford to keep a roof over their heads, put gas in their cars. The gas prices are rising, food costs are rising, all costs are rising. And so we have to equip them with the means and the resources to take care of themselves and their families.
Congressman.
People deserve a living wage, the ability to be able to work with dignity, an opportunity to create generational wealth. And so many people in South Carolina just are not getting that right now because we have a governor who's focused on bringing in jobs that are more low-wage jobs. We need to be focused more on not so much the hourly jobs, but the salary jobs, the good jobs, the ones that provide a good salary and benefits, health care, 401k. And when I talk to CEOs and business owners and folks who are looking to expand in South Carolina or to invest in South Carolina, the major things they're looking at are schools. And we have some of the worst schools in the country because we don't pay the teachers what they deserve. Employers are also looking at our health care system. And if we expand Medicaid, we can provide health care to hundreds of thousands of South Carolinians. But none of this can get done unless we win in November, and I'll be able to do that.
Mr. Boyd, he didn't make it go. Go ahead, Mr. Boyd.
Let's just be honest here. COVID hit. When COVID hit, we found another way of generating income. People were not working. People were put out of jobs. And this is a part of the reason you are not seeing people go back. They've learned to sustain for themselves. They've learned to create income or find another way to get income. So you have more business owners now. So therefore, they've gotten creative. They're home. They're not going back to their old jobs because they found out that they can be their own bosses. Quite frankly, I know this because I've been talking to the people of South Carolina. There was one teacher that I met down in Charleston who made fabulous candles. She's not returning back to her school next year because she made more money making candles. People found another way, cryptocurrency, Cash App, so many different ways. We are facing a recession.
Thank you, Mr. Boyd. Congressman, Question to you. I was recently speaking with a police officer in Cheraw who told me that they continue to arrest the same teenagers over and over, and they're sent to the Department of Juvenile Justice, then they're released, and then they're right back at it. It seems like their parents or caregivers apparently just aren't an influence in their lives, and soon many of these teens will turn 18, and then they'll be arrested as adults. How do you break this cycle and reduce crime in our state?
Listen, our crime, our people in our communities need to feel safe, and every single South Carolinian should feel safe in their own community. But that's not the case right now, and people know that. South Carolina is at a record time, all-time high crime rate, and this is after 6 years of a Governor McMaster. We've had averaged over 2 mass shootings per month this year, and there's a lot of issues to deal with this. But as it relates to juveniles, this comes back to opportunities and education. And again, we have one of the worst school systems in the entire country because we don't treat our teachers with respect. And that includes how we pay them, but also how we treat them as well. We need to invest in our schools by investing in our teachers. And we need to bring the good paying jobs to South Carolina to provide people opportunity, because if you provide them with opportunity, they can take full advantage of that.
Thank you. Mr. Boyd?
Yeah, can you please repeat the question?
Yes, I was just asking about how do you break this cycle of children being arrested and then now being arrested as adults and breaking that cycle and dealing with crime?
Sure, thank you for repeating that. One thing I will tell you, we need to change the way these folks come into DJJ. Okay, we have to understand that sometimes we need an intake process to determine if this person has a behavioral health problem or if this person is basically just running wild, doing what they want to do. And that's where it needs to start. And I have to tell you, some people, you can try to incarcerate and they're just going to be whoever they want to be, do whatever they want to do. But there are some people who need to be medicated or they need to have some type of counseling. But just to throw everyone into the same room, it's not helping. It's not helping. And that's why we see recidivism and the same issues occur over and over again, because healthcare could address a lot of those problems, but we're too lazy to explore it.
Great, thank you, sir. And Senator McLeod.
It's no secret that Governor McMaster and our Republican-controlled legislature invest more in prisons than they do in public education. That has to change. And until that changes, we have to continue to make sure that our students, our young people, don't fall through the cracks. Those who are here and don't leave our state in search of higher pay and equal opportunity and a better quality of life. I got a bill passed in the South Carolina Senate that changed the trajectory of our state when it comes to the school-to-prison pipeline. It was the Disturbing Schools Law. And it was when I discovered that over 30,000 South Carolina students had been sent to DJJ from their classrooms for stuff like chewing gum, blowing bubbles in class, and clowning in class. And, we have to change antiquated, outdated laws like that to make sure that our children don't fall through the cracks. And as governor, I will prioritize that.
Thank you, Senator. And Nick Reynolds to Mr. Boyd.
Mr. Boyd, in the past year, 43% of Black South Carolinians said that they had been discriminated against because of their race, according to the latest Winthrop poll. What would you do as governor to cultivate a more inclusive state as more people feel uncomfortable expressing their opinions out of fear of being harassed?
Well, that's a great question, and I'm surprised it's only 43%. A part of my platform is bridging communities. Quite honestly, we just don't know enough about each other. We need to interact more. Okay, I'm from Darlington County. Let's just be honest. When I grew up, we would still use the same term across the tracks because things were so segregated. It's 2022. We need to be more inclusive in our hiring processes. We need to be more inclusive in our worshiping processes. We just need to work together as a community in all. That includes law enforcement, that includes education, that includes healthcare. So in terms of a policy, you have to understand, we live in a great state. We live in a great country. People are free to do whatever they want to do. but they just don't interact with each other enough to learn enough about each other to get to know one another. So therefore, these biases and things like that just become a part of.
Thank you, Mr. Boyd. Sorry.
I do apologize.
Senator McLeod.
I believe that equity and inclusion go hand in hand with workforce development, a real meaningful investment in public education, and access to quality health care. Those are the gateways to economic opportunity, and those are the things that folks who live in our rural communities and people of color are struggling against, especially during a global pandemic when we have a governor who has done everything he can to further marginalize the voices of the minority. And we need a governor who is willing to tackle the tough issues dealing with race, to address the systemic reforms that we all know we need. We haven't had a governor who has been willing to do that. And running as, a Republican light and pandering to certain audiences is not going to be the answer. It's a losing strategy. We've already tried that. As governor, I will focus on equity and inclusion.
Thank you, Senator. Congressman Cunningham.
Look, we live in the best country in the world, and we live in the best state in that country. And the fact is, our government should look more like the people that it represents. That's why I'm committed to having the most diverse cabinet and staff of any governor in South Carolina's history. We need better representation all across the board. And when we're holding these roundtable teacher discussions, people are telling us that we need more black male teachers in the schools. When kids come to school, they need to see teachers that look like them. And that representation is absent. And we also recognize the racial disparities that exist in our state. And that's no more prevalent than it is in our criminal justice system with marijuana arrest. The fact is, if you're black, you're 4 times more likely to get arrested for marijuana than somebody who's white. In some parts of the state, it's 8 times likely. That's why we have to legalize it and decriminalize it.
Thank you, Congressman. Felicia Eady for Senator McLeod.
South Carolina ranks 9th worst among states when it comes to the percentage of residents killed by gunfire. And the CDC says that there are more than 1,100 total gun deaths in our state in 2020. And so far this year, Gun Violence Archive ranks South Carolina as 5th in the nation for mass shootings. What policies would you support to curb this violence?
Absolutely. I mean, we don't even have to reinvent the wheel to address gun violence in South Carolina. We can look at states like Hawaii. They have a mandatory 14-day waiting period. They also require a gun buyer to be at least 21 years old. There are things that we can do. We can expand background checks here in South Carolina and wait until the background check clears before a gun can be purchased. We can also make sure that those who carry guns legally have to carry liability insurance so that the rash of break-ins and the higher incidence of gun violence that we're seeing will be curbed and decreased by that. I personally believe that AR-15s and other semi-automatic rifles should not be in the hands of civilians. They are weapons of war. They are not. They should not be sold to civilians. I also believe in red flag laws and other common sense gun reforms, which is why I've been named a common sense gun advocate by Moms Demand Action.
Congressman, to you.
Look, no one should have to worry about their son or daughter or loved one as they walk out the door and go to school or church or the mall. But the fact is, right now, our crime rate has never been higher. And our gun violence issue is out of control. When we see a shooting at a baseball field in North Charleston, like all of us can picture our son or daughter being there for that. And we have to do something. And in Congress, that's why I work to expand background checks and close the Charleston loophole. And I got both of those through with bipartisan support by bringing people together. Compare that to Governor McMaster. You know what his solution is? To do nothing. He's a do-nothing governor because he's a governor of the past. We need a governor of the future. But we can't do any of the things that we want to do. Expand background checks, close the Charleston loophole, unless we win in November.
And Mr. Boyd.
You know, I would echo the sentiments of both of my candidates here, but the reality is we are putting out a forest fire with a sippy cup. Every day we see mass shootings. There are so many children who are victims of this gun violence. So therefore, I am in favor of putting counselors in the schools. And when we can put counselors in the schools, we need to teach conflict resolution, because it seems that that is the root of the issue. Yes, gun violence, someone has their hands on a gun that they shouldn't have, and we can create all the laws that we want to. But the reality is we need to change the mindset. So therefore, I believe that's where we need to begin, and we need to change that policy. So going forth, this may be the most untraditional thing you've ever heard any gubernatorial candidate say, but I am in favor of teaching children first aid so that when someone gets hit in a drive-by, they can run in the house and they know how to save their family by making a tourniquet or CPR.
Thank you, Mr. Boyd.
Yes.
Congressman Cunningham, this is for you. Hundreds of women in South Carolina will be forced to have unwanted pregnancies if the Supreme Court overturns Roe, which is expected. And once the state's 6-week abortion ban goes into effect, what could you do as governor to improve health outcomes for mothers and children?
I'll tell you what I could do. I could use my veto pen to veto legislation that tries to rip away a woman's right. And the fact is that I trust women to make their own health care decisions. And if and when Roe v. Wade is overturned, which it seems like it is, then Governor McMaster has told everyone that he wants to ban all abortions and have no exceptions for rape, incest, or life of the mother. That's the reality here. And we're on the verge as a state of, we're poised for our daughters to have fewer rights than their mothers and their grandmothers. Those rights are slipping through our very own fingers. And the only thing that can stop that is my veto pen. That is why the stakes of this election are so high for every South Carolinian and for the future generations as well, to allow women to make their own decisions.
Mr. Boyd, to you.
I am in favor of allowing women to make their own decisions. The reason being, it's their body, it's their health, their decisions, it's the trajectory of their lives. Who am I to make a decision for them that I'd probably never ever see again? But hey, I agree with Joe. The power of the veto. Executive orders. There are so many things that we can do, or I will do as governor, to protect the rights of women. Quite honestly, someone has to do it because no one's done it yet. And I'm going to be that governor to do it.
And Senator McLeod.
I'm the only candidate in this race who has a uterus. I'm the only candidate in this race who has given birth. I'm the only candidate in this race who has been on the front lines of this fight for years. And I, as governor, I get to set the tone and the priorities of our state, in addition to having veto power. So I will exercise everything, every power I have to stop this senselessness that this Republican governor and Republican-controlled legislature has been inflicting on women and girls across South Carolina. I can tell you, as a sexual assault survivor, I stood on the floor of the South Carolina Senate and shared my experience when our male-dominated Senate, at the time I was one of only 46 senators, I was one of only 4 women. And they come for our reproductive rights and freedoms every year. We've got to stop that, and as governor, I can do that.
Thank you, Senator. And Nick Reynolds to Mr. Boyd for the next question.
Mr. Boyd, at the beginning of this year, there were more than 1,100 vacant teaching positions across the state. What would you propose to attract and retain more teachers?
First of all, we need to stop lying to our teachers and telling them that we're going to pay them more year after year and do absolutely nothing. We dangle the carrots in their face and we take it back and do absolutely nothing. Teachers are responsible day in and day out for some of our most precious and vulnerable resources, our future. Now, to get straight to it, to answer your question, COVID took a lot of our teachers out of the workforce. Why? Because so many teachers were at an age in which they were at high risk for contracting COVID, but no one ever did anything to protect them either. So with them leaving, can you blame them? they have families to take care of as well. They've made enough sacrifices, and we haven't done enough for them. We can change the testing requirements or the admissions requirements. And when I say admissions, I'm sorry, I mean more so the criteria in which we recruit teachers, you know, praxis testing. We can reduce a lot of the testing. Yeah, go ahead.
We have to listen to teachers and administrators. They are on the front lines. As legislators, there aren't very many at all in the South Carolina legislature who are educators. And for us to impose our thoughts and desires for teachers when they're telling us what they need to be successful is crazy. We have to listen to them on the front end. And they talk a lot about wanting higher pay, and they need and deserve higher pay. So many teachers leave their classrooms and have to drive for Uber and DoorDash. We need to pay them in alignment with the national average, but we also need to do some of the other things that they say they need to be successful, like smaller classroom sizes and less testing. We have to listen to teachers and administrators who are on the front end instead of mandating, giving them unfunded mandates year after year, lying to them about what we plan to do for them when it comes to their lives and livelihoods. And I will do that as governor.
Congressman?
Yeah, look, I don't know if there's a more important job than taking care of our kids. And you know, I know that when I drop my son off at school and he runs through the door, you know, my heart runs through it with him. And because he's so important to me, the teachers that take care of him are important to me as well. And I want to live in a state where full-time teachers don't have to wait tables or drive an Uber just to pay for their rent. I don't think that's too much to ask for. 1 out of 7 teachers left their classroom just last year, and they're leaving because they feel disrespected, because they're underpaid and they're overworked. And that's just the truth. That's why we have a plan to address this issue by a 10% raise across the board, and by getting the starting salary for teachers from $36,000 a year up to $50,000 a year by the end of my administration. You compare that to what Governor McMaster's doing, which is nothing. Teachers need help, and to those teachers that are watching here tonight, I can tell you that help is on the way.
And Felicia Eady to Senator McLeod.
During the pandemic, some folks lost their jobs and with that, their access to health insurance. How would you work with the legislature, considering their opposition to expanding Medicaid eligibility, to provide a safety net for health care?
As someone who lives with a chronic health condition, sickle cell anemia, I've been very open about the fact that before I had health insurance, when I started my own company, my health insurance premium every month was higher than my mortgage. And I know what that feels like, to have to pray that nothing crazy happens. My boys were much younger, and this is something that so many South Carolinians continue to struggle with. But as governor, one of the things that I do get to do is expand Medicaid. On day one, right out of the gate, I will do that for South Carolinians so that over 100,000 South Carolinians no longer fall through the cracks. There's a reason that Republican governors across the country have expanded Medicaid. It will bring jobs into our state. It will be a tremendous economic boost for our state. It will help us to reopen our rural hospitals and, you know, just provide access to quality health care for so many South Carolinians. That's what South Carolinians need and deserve to thrive in this state. And as governor, I can make that a reality for them.
Thank you, Senator. Congressman?
Yeah, look, I mean, nobody should go broke or go into debt or bankruptcy because they fall ill or get sick or have a genetic condition. That's why I want to expand Medicaid on day one. And while it used to be the federal government picked up 90% of the tab, when I was in Congress, I worked to pass legislation to up that, where the federal government picks up 95% and the state only has to kick in 5%. To me, it's a moral issue. How we want to treat our neighbors, how we want to treat each other. 38 other states have already done this, including Republican states, because it's a winner and it's a home run. Not only morally, but economically as well. 40,000 new jobs can be created through this. And this isn't just about the people that would be covered by expanding Medicaid. Every person with private insurance would see their rates go down as well. In addition to that, it's about taking care of our veterans, because 1 out of 4 uninsured veterans would have access to health care as well.
Thank you. Mr. Boyd?
Yes. Years ago, the Affordable Care Act was signed. This was supposed to take care of this problem. Unfortunately, there are so many selfish people who only think about themselves, who are in positions in which they were elected to serve, who said, no, we will not take care of the people of the United States. But one thing I can tell you, when I'm governor, I do plan to expand Medicaid. Now, I won't stand here and tell you I will expand it on day one, because I can already tell you as a person that works in healthcare, when I get into that office, I've got a lot of mess to clean up. But I will strategically and methodically expand Medicaid so that we can take care of the population of South Carolina. And that will be the first steps to taking care of this, well, the problem that you just asked about.
Great. Thank you, sir. Congressman, this next question is for you. How would you work to make education in this state more attainable and affordable, while also making sure we have a pipeline of talent to grow and attract companies to our state?
Of course. And, you know, I mentioned earlier that when companies are looking to expand or invest in South Carolina, they're looking at the quality of schools. You know, how are the schools going to be? Do they want to send their kids to schools? Are they going to be able to attract a healthy and educated workforce? And most issues that we're going to talk about tonight can all be tied back to that, to our schools and our health care. But, you know, we have a lot of issues right now with our public schools. I'm a proud product of public education, and my son will be as well. And this is important to me. And the fact is, as we travel across the state, our teachers are telling us time and time again, they're not getting the respect they deserve. And we mentioned money earlier, and pay, and increase in wages, but it's just about how we treat teachers. And when we sit down with teachers, we talk to them, they're saying, you know, I've got to ask permission to go use the restroom. I got to ask somebody to watch my class for me. It's about getting them more help. That's why we put out a plan to retain teachers and improve schools on our website at joeforsouthcarolina.com.
Mr. Boyd?
If you could repeat that question one more time.
Yes, so it's just a question about how you would make education more attainable and affordable, and also make sure that we have a pipeline of talent to grow and attract companies in our state.
Yeah, absolutely. If you would visit my website, www.boyd4, well, actually, let's just get to the answer, then I'll come back to the website. There is a huge issue right now in which we've removed trade schools or trade programs from a lot of the high schools here. Those programs should have stayed exactly where they are. Everyone does not want to go to a four-year institution. Everyone may want to go in business for themselves or go to a two-year institution. You know, there's a forgotten population out there, Latinos and Latinas who are, you know, affiliated with DACA. You know, they actually leave the state because we're not helping retain that type of talent. We need to do a better job of making sure we're actually getting to the needs of everyone. So we're having everyone, you know, leave the state, and we're part of the problem.
Thank
so
you, sir. Sorry,
I ran out of time. I'll do so.
That's all right. We'll get the website next. Senator.
As someone whose family has been in business in this state for 108 years, you know, I see up close and personal, and coming from a rural community, having graduated from the public schools of South Carolina, I think there are a couple of things that we have to do. And one of them is to fully and equitably fund public education in every county, all 46 counties. That is not happening. And we also have to stop paying lip service to workforce development and actually put into place strong workforce development policies, because the reality is we do have high-paying jobs right here in South Carolina. We just don't have South Carolinians who are equipped with the skill sets to fill those jobs. And so the Republicans know they are going to bring in people from out of state to bring in, like my opponent came from out of state. He's not from South Carolina, but they bring in folks from out of state to fill those jobs, and South Carolinians really don't benefit. As governor, I'll make sure they do.
Thank you, Senator. Nick, the next question to Mr. Boyd.
Mr. Boyd, ultimately, to enact the policies that any candidate has discussed tonight, they're going to be able to need to win in November. And an average of polls in the lead up to the 2022 midterms show Democrats lagging Republicans in the generic ballot by several points. Democratic President Joe Biden's approval ratings are hovering around 40%. And over the last several years, South Carolina has remained a deeply red state, with Democrats' share in the state house in steady decline. Ultimately, what will it take for your party's ideas to catch on with voters?
Well, quite honestly, I will be very honest. We need to do a better job of registering voters and getting a better message out to those who are potential voters and also those who are voters. Because when you have a lot of money just to throw around, what happens is we feed propaganda into the communities. And that's why we're looking at what we're looking at now. We're looking at the climate that we're looking at now in terms of race relations, in terms of just the garbage that's eaten up on the internet. That's a part of the issue. Now, of course, it's really hard to regulate because who regulates the internet? No one. FCC? No one. So therefore, we need to do a better job of being very strategic in working on our messaging.
Senator McLeod?
Can you repeat the question?
Nick?
Yes, it's just a question of how Democratic policies can gain traction with voters to be able to win in November.
Well, I don't know that it's necessarily Democratic policies. I think the Democrats have to stop being scared. They have to stop running as Republican lights and really tackle the issues that people care about. That's why so many people across South Carolina have been energized and excited about my candidacy, because I am different. Yes, I'm a Democrat, but I'm not a party person. I'm a people person, and I want to make sure that South Carolinians are equipped with everything they need to thrive in this state. I'm tired of seeing our best and brightest young people leave our state in droves in search of higher pay and equal opportunity and a better quality of life. I want them to have that right here. But it's going to take a fighter, a proven leader, somebody who is not afraid to take on the status quo and to fight these good old boys and gals and make sure that we are making a meaningful difference in the lives of everyday South Carolinians, starting with $15 an hour for a living wage, access to quality health care, and so much more. And I will do that as governor.
I mean, obviously the stakes are high in this election. I mean, South Carolina is dead last in roads. We're near the bottom in health care and jobs and teacher pay. So I don't think the stakes could be any higher for the future generations. That's why it's important to put our best foot forward. And speaking as the only candidate up here tonight that's ever flipped a seat, I can tell you it's going to be a tough race. But I can also tell you I'm up for the challenge and that we've done it before. See, back in 2018, we flipped the first congressional district. And nobody thought we could do it. Even on election night, we had a 9% chance at winning, but we did the impossible. It's a district that Trump carried by 13 points back in 2016. Everyone acknowledges that to win statewide, we got to do better than Hillary Clinton did in 2016. And I'm the only one who's done better than she did. We have to do better than Joe Biden did in 2020. And now I'm the only candidate up here that did better than him. I outperformed him by 5 points. We've done the impossible before, and we can do it again.
Thank you, Congressman. Felicia, to Senator McLeod.
The office of governor here in South Carolina carries less power than the position does in other states. And it's all but likely that you will be working with a General Assembly made up primarily of Republicans. So if elected, how would you plan to work with Republicans to advance an agenda?
I will do exactly what I do right now as the only candidate in this race who is currently serving and has served since 2010 when I was first elected. I know what it takes to navigate that space and to work with Republicans to get things done for the people of South Carolina. And I'm not just talking about legislation, but legislation as well, like my bipartisan Disturbing Schools bill that I mentioned earlier that will keep thousands of South Carolina students from going from their classrooms into the school to prison pipeline. I had bipartisan support for that, got it passed unanimously out of the South Carolina Senate, overwhelmingly out of the South Carolina House. And today, the new law only allows 3 instances where a student can be arrested in his or her classroom. So I know how to navigate that space very well. I have the respect of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, and I'm the only one who has worked on both sides of the aisle. And as governor, I will continue those relationships to get things done for the people of South Carolina.
Thank you, sir. Congressman.
You know, Gavin, one of my proudest moments while serving in Congress was passing the bill that closed the Charleston loophole with bipartisan support. And it's one of my proudest moments because I remember exactly where I was standing on the House floor when the votes ticked up over the limit, and it passed. And I remember who I was talking to, because I was speaking to another Republican. He came up to me, he trusted me, he asked me, why should he vote for this bill? And I remember looking up in the gallery, I saw the late Senator Pinckney's widow and her 2 beautiful children, and I told him a story about what happened in Charleston and why this loophole needed to be closed. And then he went over there and he voted with me to close it. Listen, I've brought people together from opposite ends of the political spectrum. If I can bring Democrats and Republicans together in Washington, D.C., I can do the same thing in Columbia, right here in South Carolina. I've done this before, and I could do it again. And I would humbly ask for your vote and your support.
Mr. Boyd.
It's no secret I have never served in any elected office in South Carolina. I don't owe anybody anything. I don't owe any promises. Therefore, no one can hold my feet over the fire to say that, hey, Carlton, you need to do this. I'm not that type of guy. I am here for the people, and I am here to serve the citizens of South Carolina. Now, with that, let's just be honest. I don't have a fabricated record. I don't have an exaggerated record or anything that is going to come back and haunt me. But one thing I can tell you, I don't care if you're a Republican, I don't care if you're independent, and I don't care if you're a Democrat. But if we're going to work together, we're going to work together regardless. And we're going to take care of the people of South Carolina. And as governor, that's what you're going to get.
Thank you, sir. Congressman, to you, low-lying cities on the coast like Charleston are prone to a phenomenon called sunny day flooding, where flooding occurs not due to storm events, but due to the tide or other factors. As governor, what would you do to help officials in the low country and the coast to address these issues, as well as climate change threats that face our state?
The same thing that I've been doing, and the same thing that I did in Congress. It was my bipartisan bill to ban offshore drilling that made it through the U.S. House of Representatives. And it's about looking at climate change not only as a challenge, but an opportunity to move away from dirty energy resources and move towards more clean, renewable energy resources. That's why that bill to ban offshore drilling was so important. And the fact is, I had bipartisan support for it. And again, you know, if I could bring members on the extreme wings like AOC and Matt Gaetz together to vote on a bill like that, imagine what I can do right here in South Carolina by bringing people together and focusing on this challenge, but turning it into an opportunity to create new, good-paying jobs, clean, renewable energy jobs, solar industry. I want South Carolina to be the #1 electric car manufacturer in the entire country. Compare those ideas with McMaster's no ideas, and that's the difference.
Mr. Boyd, to you.
Yes, I would encourage anyone to use any type of green energy, whether you're building projects. We would offer any type of incentives to make sure that we're doing the best to protect South Carolina. Anything with climate change, hey, I'm all for it. But one thing I can tell you, I'm not going to sit up here and lie to you and tell you I know everything about the environment. I'm not going to tell you I'm an engineer and I can do, you know, these things, but I do understand as a leader, that's when I yield to those who know more than me. So therefore, I would allow them to make recommendations to me as governor, and we're going to find the money in order to get these projects taken care of. We're going to take care of South Carolina. We're going to make sure everyone is safe. We want everyone to have clean drinking water. We want to make sure that we're preserving the skylines because South Carolina is beautiful, and we have the #1 tourist industry in the whole, well, you know, you understand. That's our moneymaker, our bread and butter. So we've got to protect that as well.
And Sarah McLeod, to you.
Thank you. You know, when I think about flooding, I think about the fact that we have a governor who does not listen to the science or the scientists. As governor, when I am governor, I will. And I'll listen to the public health experts as well when it comes to COVID-19. But, you know, flooding is a real issue, especially in Charleston. And we've got to focus on clean energy, clean water. We've got to focus on green jobs and solar energy. And those are the reasons that, those and other reasons are why I've been endorsed by Our Revolution and Sunrise Charleston and other environmental groups, because they see me fighting for environmental justice and fighting for the people of South Carolina on the coast, especially when it comes to environmental issues. And we've got to continue that. We need a governor who's going to make sure that she listens to the science and follows the scientists so that the people of South Carolina are protected.
And Nick with another question.
The state legislature, like others around the country, moved in a bipartisan fashion this session to enact legislation to restrict the ability for transgender athletes to compete in women's sports. Do you feel it was necessary for government to get involved in the conversation? And ultimately, what steps would you take as governor to ensure equality for the state's LGBTQ community?
It's Mr. Boyd.
It's me? Okay, thank you. Well, I would say this. Number one, we need to have a hate crime bill. And I was asked that just this other day when I was speaking to a trans woman. And I said, wow, isn't it a shame in 2022 that we have to ask for extra protections to make sure that you're safe? Listen, I will tell you just like this. As governor, I plan to put that hate crime bill in place. Now, when it comes down to the sports, hey, look, as governor, you have to make a lot of tough decisions. And I can promise you, whether it's between these candidates here or someone anywhere else you want to take me in South Carolina, I challenge you to find a larger and a bigger advocate for the LGBTQ community than Carlton Boyd. But I believe sports should remain with males and females.
Thank you, sir. And Sarah McLeod?
I am the only candidate in this primary who fought against the transgender bill on the Senate floor. It's amazing to me that we have a Republican majority who finds so much time to prioritize senseless bills, very divisive and discriminatory bills, like the Transgender and Sports Act bill. As governor, I will set the tone and the priorities of our state to fight senseless legislation like that. Once it is introduced, it still has to pass, and it still, I still would have veto power. I will veto any bills that discriminate against anyone for any reason. I know what it's like. I know what it feels like to be discriminated against. I know that these communities that have always been marginalized will continue to be marginalized under this governor. When I am governor of South Carolina, that will change.
Thank you. And Congressman?
Look, nobody should be discriminated against because of who they are or who they love. And the truth is, there was already a process in place to address issues like this. And you can probably count on one hand how many kids had applied and been approved to go through that particular process. So let's deal with this issue the way we should deal with it. Compassion, empathy. You think about Governor McMaster, what a big man to pick on little kids, huh? This comes down to mental health issues as well. And the fact is, the number one cause of death of kids ages 10 to 19 is suicide. And we know that half of transgender kids have attempted suicide in this last year. We need to care for our kids and send a clear message to our politicians to leave our kids alone.
Thank you, Congressman. And we have time for one last question. It's going to be 30 seconds each. And Sarah McLeod, we're going to start with you. Should you win the Democratic nomination, what characteristics would you look for in a running mate?
Someone who is not afraid to tackle the tough issues that are facing South Carolina. Somebody who leads with courage, has compassion and empathy for the people of South Carolina. Somebody who understands the issues and what's at stake. I know what it's like to be in a community, to be a part of a community that is marginalized and without a voice in government. So my running mate would have to be someone who is able to fight for the people of South Carolina.
Congressman.
Look, I'll be looking for a running mate that'll be ready on day one. Because the fact is, the issues and the challenges that our state is facing right now cannot wait. Cannot be any on-the-job training. And so they have to be ready on day one. And for those who tuned in, I want to say thank you for taking the time out to learn more about the issues and the candidates. I want to thank two of my opponents for being here this evening to discuss the issues and discuss the things that we agree upon.
Thank you, Congressman. And Mr. Boyd.
Yes, number one, I am a very calculated person. So therefore, I'm looking for someone that has more experience than I do in certain things, so we can balance each other out. I'm looking for someone who can be empathetic and have a listening ear to understand the communities that we're going to serve. Another thing I want to make sure, and I want to make this very clear, I want to take someone with me who's going to understand the needs of our seniors.
Thank you, Mr. Boyd. And I want to thank all of our candidates and our questioners and our viewers for tuning in. For everyone here at ETV, I'm Gavin Jackson. We're wishing you a good night. And remember, primary day is June 14th. Make sure you go out and vote.